Hello. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Amherst. I'm Reverend Michelle Buhite, the minister of this congregation. We are so glad you have chosen to join us in worship. Please see our website, uuamherst.org, or the emailed weekly update for opportunities to connect and grow your soul. We begin our time together by lighting the chalice. The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of our commitment to bring more justice and compassion to a hurting world. May the flame we ignite burn brightly in our hearts and shine through our lives. Our opening words come from Frederick Buechner. You are seeing everything for the last time, and everything you see is gilded with goodbyes. The child's hand like a starfish on the pillow, your hand on the doorknob, the dachshunds lurching off the forbidden couch when you come through the door. It is the first day because it has never been before, and it is the last day because it will never be again. Be alive if you can through today, this day of your life. Follow your feet. Put on the coffee, start the orange juice, the bacon, the toast. Then go wake your children and think about your life and about living and about the work of your hands.
And now, our time for all ages. How to feed 5,000 people.
Once upon a time, Jesus and his disciples, that is, his closest followers, were trying to take a day off. Jesus had become very popular, and people just wouldn't leave him alone. Jesus and the disciples wanted a little time away from the crowds that followed them everywhere, so they rented a boat and went to a lonely place far from any village. But people figured out where they were going. And by the time Jesus and his friends landed the boat, there were 5,000 people waiting there for them. So Jesus started to teach them, and he talked to them for hours. It started getting late, and the disciples of Jesus pulled him aside and said,
"We need to send these people to one of the nearby villages so they can get some food."
No,
said Jesus.
the villages around here are too small to feed 5,000 people. You'll have to give them something yourself.
"What do you mean?
His disciples said.
We don't have enough money to go buy enough bread for all these people." "We've got 17 tomatoes and a couple loaves of bread. That's it."
That'll be enough,
said Jesus. His disciples looked at him as if he were crazy. There was no way that there would be enough food for 5,000 people. But Jesus had spent the whole day teaching people about the kingdom of love, teaching them that everyone is dependent on someone else. And while he was sitting up in front of the crowd teaching, he looked out and saw that many of the 5,000 people had brought their own food with them. He watched them as they nibbled away at their own food, ignoring the fact that many of the people around them had no food at all. Jesus told everyone to sit down on the grass. All 5,000 people sat down. Jesus brought out the 5 loaves of bread. Being a good Jew, he blessed the bread using the traditional Jewish blessing.
Blessed are you, O Holy One, creator of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth.
Then, so everyone could see, Jesus broke the bread and cut up the fish and divided it up so the disciples could hand it around. Everyone saw that even though Jesus and his disciples had barely enough food for themselves, they were going to share it with everyone. From where he sat, Jesus could see the truth dawning in people's eyes. All day long, Jesus had been teaching them that in the kingdom of heaven, it existed here and now, if only people would recognize it. Now, Jesus was giving them a chance to show they understood. and to act as if the kingdom of heaven truly existed. The disciples began to pass around the bread and the fried fish, shaking their heads because they knew there wasn't going to be enough food for everyone. Yet, miracle of miracles, there was plenty of food to go around. People who had food put some of their food into the baskets so it could be shared. People who hadn't brought food with them took some food from the baskets. By the time the followers of Jesus had passed the baskets to all 5,000 people, everyone had gotten enough to eat, and there was so much food left over that it filled 12 baskets. And that's the story of how Jesus fed 5,000 people with just a few loaves of bread and a couple of fried fish. Many people believe that Jesus performed a magical miracle when he blessed the bread of fish, and that somehow God turned a dozen loaves of bread and 2 fish into thousands of loaves and bread and thousands of fried fish. It's easier to believe that God performed the miracle than to believe that humans could perform the same miracle. Because if humans perform the miracle, that means we could do the same thing today, to share with those who need it and to live as if the kingdom of heaven existed here and now.
It's the last weekend of August. Labor Day is just around the corner, with the start of a new school year, whatever that looks like for you, your family, and your friends. These are uncertain times, and the details of our lives are far from routine. As we enter the 7th month of pandemic isolation, whatever sense of adventure we may have had has surely waned. I'm calling for a 7th inning stretch. That's right, a 7th inning stretch. We need a break, a pause, a moment to take a look at what we are doing and get some perspective. We might need to change our game plan. At the very least, we need something to refresh us and revive our spirits so that we can finish with a degree of grace and maybe even a surprise win. For the first several months of the pandemic, our focus was on getting through, which meant that our time together was to bring a word of hope and the affirmation that we are held in a loving circle of community. And rightly so. You may not have ventured much out of your home, so the reminder that although isolated, you are not alone was an important message. It's still an important message. But we cannot remain in a chrysalis state forever. And as the monarch butterflies flitting about my hydrangeas remind me, it's time for a new way of being in the world. It's time to remember who and whose we are. We are a people of faith whose heritage includes deep involvement in life-changing social movements. Over the past 6 decades, our congregation has embraced the call to work on behalf of others to bring more justice and compassion to a hurting world. As Labor Day approaches, let's take inspiration from the words and deeds of prophetic people who fought the good fight for so many justice movements, those who dared to dream of a better way, of humane and safe working conditions, women's suffrage, abolition, mental health reform, all these movements where our Unitarian and Universalist ancestors were out in front. We stand on the shoulders of giants who heard the call to make the world a more just and fair place. Many of us have participated in the fight for LGBTQ rights, marriage equality, immigration reform, and Black Lives Matter, to name just a few. Our faith calls us to confront the inequities of our time. We are a people of deeds, not creeds. But even in the midst of the struggle, whether it is the labor of our hands or the will to stay the course to stop millions more from succumbing to the pandemic, we must, occasionally, drink from the cup of hope.
Put your hat on, honey. You can ask Mimi to come and sing Bread and Roses with me. As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, a million darkened kitchens, a thousand mill lofts gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses. As we go marching, marching, we battle too for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our life shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing their ancient call for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits knew. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we bring the greater days. The rising of the women means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler tend that toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.
The work appears so clear, doesn't it, when we look back? And it appears so overwhelming when we gaze at what is before us, or heaven forbid, what lies ahead. Surely our spiritual ancestors had an easier time with only one major justice issue to focus on. Of course, that is never the case. There are always multiple problems that clamor for our attention, and our days are not so very different from those of our ancestors. That said, there is truly only ever one cause worth working for: love. Does that sound familiar? It's what Reverend Amy Beltane preached last week. There is only one cause worth working for: love. It seems like so much more because we lose sight of the common thread that binds all of the issues that tug at us and prompt our action. Think about it. We support racial justice and immigration reform because we love people. We believe in their inherent worth and dignity, and we affirm and promote that worth. That same foundational value of inherent worth and dignity inspires us and sustains us in a ministry of feeding people through the Little Free Pantry. It drives individuals to sew and distribute face masks to keep others safe during the pandemic. We love people. We are climate activists because we love the earth. Our hearts are broken as species are driven to extinction, not because of some mathematical formula about species diversity, but because it hurts us to imagine a world without them. We mourn the loss of rainforests and coral reefs for more reasons than their impact on the environment. Think about something you are passionate about. Can you follow the thread to love? passionate about gardening and growing wholesome food for yourself and others? That commitment to nurture and care for people and to treat the earth with respect, that's love. Maybe alternative energy is your thing, creating and supporting efforts to lessen our impact on the earth and its atmosphere. Even if it is fear for future generations that motivates you, I suggest the real basis is love. I'm pretty sure that whatever the work you do to make the world a better place, it is based in love, even if you have to move through fear to find it. Fear and guilt are tremendous motivators, but love is stronger. It is love, not fear, and certainly not hate, that fuels our work. Love is the great work. You'll notice that my emphasis so far has been on the work we do beyond the doors of our congregation. It is somewhat ironic that we are forced to remain outside our doors, and yet that complicates our ability to be a united force for good in the world. But there is work much closer to home. Very, very close to home. Ourselves. Let's return to the story we heard earlier, a retelling of the biblical narrative of Jesus feeding the 5,000. There are important clues within the story about the true nature of the great work of love. Let's note some of the salient points, beginning with some assumptions. Jesus and his disciples never had a big building to share their message. They gathered in small groups, which became larger groups as the message took hold. We can assume that many people in the crowd had heard Jesus speak before, and that they had shared the message with friends, neighbors, and family. It is unlikely that random people who were going about their daily business saw the growing crowd and abandoned their plans for the day to hike to an indeterminate location for no specified reason. Although the disciples indicated a concern about the comfort and care of the crowd, Jesus did not make it his job to figure out what to do about the assembly. When the disciples fretted about the paltry resources, Jesus trusted that the message he'd been preaching had taken root in people's hearts. He trusted them to act accordingly. Peter did not get out his trusty whistle and try to organize impromptu picnics among the haves and the have-nots. Jesus simply broke the bread and fishes, gave thanks for them, and trusted the people to do the next thing, demonstrating that they had truly heard and internalized the message of kindness and radical hospitality. The Master gave freely of his resources. How could they do less? So what can we take from this? In a simple sentence, inner change leads to outward action. If we only focus on the outward action, we only see the tip of the iceberg. The action is important, incredibly so, but it is the result and reflection of a much deeper transformation. Before there can be change in the world, there must be a change of perspective, and that can only happen through a change of heart. As I said earlier, we do not become climate activists because we follow a mathematical formula about biodiversity and a complicated equation that points to humanity's actions, past, present, and future. We become climate activists because we love this world. Our hearts are broken because we understand at a level deeper than our intellect that what happens to the earth and her creatures happens to us. We are connected to all of life, not separate not special, not mere spectators to the complex living system that creates and sustains us. Whether or not you feel called to participate in an outward action, a movement to create more justice and compassion in the world, we are all called to do the inner work, to let love transform us, to seek the inward change that fuels our commitment to the great work of love.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of a living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands the deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
If one were to go just about anywhere in America and ask the question, what is the work of the church? The forthcoming answer would likely be, to save souls. Most churches outside Unitarian Universalism have, at their core, a theology of separation and brokenness. This theology proclaims that humanity is essentially broken and separated from God, and that there is no connection between humanity and the rest of life. The churches with this theology offer a path of salvation, a way to save one's soul. Although Unitarian Universalism has a long history and heritage in liberal Christianity, We have evolved to something significantly different. Rather than saving souls, our message is to grow the souls we have. When I use the word soul, I speak of that capacity within each individual to comprehend our deep connectedness to one another and to all of life. For us, the work of church is to open the door to explore the wide vistas of connection and interdependence. Growing a soul begins with a recognition and affirmation of connection. One of my favorite authors, Charles Eisenstein, calls that interbeing, understanding that my being partakes of your being, that there is nothing to which we are not connected. Growing a soul is a lifelong process. We don't ever achieve all grown up. We are ever in process, ever deepening roots. It is not a straight line of achievement, but a cyclic, spiraling process. The work of church is to engage in this process as individuals and as a beloved community, supporting one another along the way. Let's pause for a moment, a time of quiet reflection and meditation. I have a rose bush in my backyard. It was there when we got there. I have done nothing to earn or deserve the bush or its blooms. And yet the rose bush is my responsibility. Our responsibility, my spouse's and mine. I am never truly alone. The rose bush thrives only with our care. Last year, it was so scraggly and stingy with its blooms, it appeared blighted. So, we cut it back, hard. We would either hasten its demise or it would rally and grow. Aren't we all rose bushes of a kind, planted into life by a force beyond our knowing? Emerging green and leafy with the promise of beauty, tight buds that somehow, with the right combination of elements, burst into bloom. We like that part of the metaphor. But to thrive in our planted home, sometimes we must yield to the pruning, the ruthless rearrangement of our branches, cutting away the extraneous, the no longer vital, along with healthy branches, sacrificed for the health of the whole. After the cutting comes the time between, neither dead nor growing, slumbering in wintry depths. But when the sun warms the earth and gentle rains woo us back to life, we are renewed, fuller than before, once again containing the promise of the bud, the promise of opening to life.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know, I know, I know. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know, I know, I know. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know, I know, I know. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know my fear. I know my fear. I know my soul. I know my soul. I know this rose. I know this rose will open. I know. I know. I know. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know my fear. I know my fear. I know my soul. I know my wings. I know this wings. I know this rose will open. I know. I know. I know. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know.
Last week, my colleague in ministry, Reverend Amy Beltane, shared with us Joanna Macy's 3 paths to social change. She noted that we are called to these paths at different times in our lives. It's not one way for all. We ebb and flow as life takes us in different directions. We may have one path that feels more native to our way of being in the world, but even that may change over time. Let's revisit those 3 paths as we lean into the question of what is ours to do. Let me begin by saying that although these 3 paths are listed as being discrete, they are no more separate from each other than we are from the rest of life. There is an essential wholeness that may not always be visible, but it is always there. The first path is holding back injustice and destruction. I think of the water keepers at Standing Rock, who literally put their bodies in the way of running the Dakota Access Pipeline through sacred native land. Or of Brian Wilson, member of my home congregation, the UU Congregation of Jamestown, who is an American Vietnam veteran and peace activist, who literally put his body in the path of an oncoming train, losing both legs, to try to stop the American war machine. I think of our own Ivy Upelli, who was willingly arrested to draw attention to police brutality in Buffalo. The path of holding back injustice and destruction requires courage and self-sacrifice. It is not a path for everyone. We honor those who feel so called. The second path is unraveling and reweaving, or as Reverend Amy said, weave and mend, weave and mend. Related to the first path, this path focuses on dismantling and weaving systems, finding and creating new sources for energy that do not exploit the finite resources of the planet fall into this category. Beyond that, this path calls for us to examine why. Beyond simply finding new ways to power our addiction to technology, this path asks us to question our assumptions about what we really need and what is truly beneficial for us and for the planet. Charles Eisenstein puts forward some very compelling ideas about unraveling and reweaving how we live and why. Finally, the third path is one of vision and spirit. Probably not surprisingly, this path is my native way of being in the world. This path underscores the first two and provides the context for action. When Jesus looked out at the multitude as they shared food and broke bread together, he saw changed hearts, the result of his tireless teaching and example. I'll call this hope. When the labor activists in the 20th century sang of bread and roses, they included the intangible with the tangible. Yes, people needed fair wages and humane working conditions, and they needed hope and beauty. In the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, Jesus is reported as saying, "Man cannot live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God." I used to find that verse a little mystifying. I mean, I've read the Bible. Every word? There are some pretty challenging words in the scriptures that are purported to have proceeded from the mouth of God, mostly having to do with killing someone or taking what belongs to someone else. Allow me a moment of fanciful exegesis. If the first chapter of the Gospel of John can be trusted, then we accept that in the beginning was the Word. Some Christians interpret that as the pre-existent Christ. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But if we can extrapolate, we could look at Jesus' life as evidence to the Word. Kindness, courage, compassion, self-sacrifice. In fact, all three of the paths to personal and social change. With that interpretation, let me revisit the idea that we cannot live by bread alone, but by all of those manifestations of the Word: kindness, courage, compassion, self-sacrifice, as well as beauty, rest, and hope. Give us bread and give us roses. With the three paths of social change described by Joanna Mace well in mind, holding back injustice and destruction, unraveling and reweaving, and vision and spirit, what is the work that is ours to do? Well, we have a pretty big election coming up in a few months. I'm fairly certain there is work to be done, whatever path calls to you. For those of us whose passion lies in climate justice, I'm going to suggest that we spend the month of September reading together. I'm suggesting Charles Eisenstein's Climate, a New Story. Watch the weekly update for discussion opportunities. Remember, inward change leads to outward action. There's much to do. Find the path that speaks to you and follow it with your whole heart, not alone, but in beloved community. We are all engaged in the great work of love.
When the Spirit says do, you got to love when the Spirit says love. You've got to love when the Spirit says love. When the Spirit says love, you've got to love, oh Lord. You've got to love when the Spirit says love. 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 You've got to do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do, oh Lord. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Spirit says do.
This closing prayer offers the words of Unitarian Universalist Edward Everett Hale. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. Thank you for joining us in worship today. Please see the credits at the end of this service for information about the music and other worship elements. And do take a moment to visit our website, uuamherst.org, and click on the giving link, or text your gift to 833-987-1968. We extinguish our chalice. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Travel light and travel easy, till I see you once again. Travel light and travel easy, and remember I'm your friend.
Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who travel with us. So be swift to love, and make haste to be kind. Amen.